We'll just go as long as people are willing. All right, Robert, this mic is all yours.
Good morning. It's getting harder and harder for me to talk. So today I'm going to let Cherie do a lot of the talking. But then I'm going to share something later, not much later, but it may be stuff that you might enjoy reading. But let me start by getting my notes up here first. And Cherie is going to read this, if people don't mind. And it'll kind of explain itself as she reads it. So we're going to start with that. I'm going to skip over the prayer this morning, if people don't mind. Cherie, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, can you all see the show?
Yes.
Okay, and Cherie's going to read it.
Okay. Cherie and the chair across the room. Cherie sat quietly in the room where so many conversations had taken place over the years. Some of them spoken aloud, many of them carried silently in thought. The room itself held memories, essays written, questions asked, tears shed, moments of laughter when things suddenly became clear for no reason at all. Yet today her mind felt crowded again. The trials of the moment pressed in like an unwelcome storm. Questions about the future, concerns about the body, the quiet ache that comes when someone you love is suffering and there is little you can do to change it. She sighed and spoke aloud, though no one else was in the room. I wish I knew what to do with all these. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a quiet voice seemed to rise, not from the room, but from somewhere deeper. You have been here before, Cherie. She looked up, half amused. That sounds suspiciously like Bob. Sometimes wisdom borrows familiar voices, so it will be heard. She smiled despite herself. Well, if this is my higher self speaking, it could at least try to sound more impressive. Would that help you listen? She laughed softly. No, probably not. The voice continued. Do you remember the day Bob asked you to move between two chairs? Her mind immediately returned to that afternoon. Yes, I remember thinking it was one of his stranger experiments. Yet you did it. I did. Across the room had been two chairs facing one another. In the first chair, she sat as herself, the thinker, the participant, the one caught in the endless swirl of thoughts and reactions. Then Bob had asked her to stand up and move to the other chair. From that seat, she was asked to simply observe the woman in the first chair. Not judge, not fix, just watch. She had resisted at first. It feels silly, she had said. Bob's answer had been simple. Humor me. Now the voice continued. What did you notice from the second chair? Cherie closed her eyes for a moment. I noticed something strange. Yes? The woman in the first chair seemed very busy thinking. And what did you see from the observer's chair? That most of what she was doing wasn't really thinking. She paused, remembering the realization. It was remembering. The voice responded gently. Exactly. What the mind often calls thinking is simply the recycling of memories, old experiences, old fears, old conclusions. The mind retrieves them, rearranges them slightly, and calls the result a new thought. Cherie opened her eyes. So you're saying my mind is basically a faulty librarian? That would be a generous description. She laughed again. Bob would definitely say that. Yes, and Bob Tucker would probably add that the librarian keeps shelving the same book under different titles. Cherie nodded. That sounds like him. Silence filled the room again for a moment. Then another thought surfaced. Sometimes when I'm caught in those thoughts, I ask Bob something. The voice waited. You know the question. She almost smiled as she said it. Are you upset with me? The room felt very quiet. Then the familiar response echoed in memory. Of course not. Why would I? Cherie shook her head. That answer always annoyed me. Yes, because it made me realize something. What did it make you realize? That the upset I was imagining didn't exist anywhere except in my own thoughts. Exactly. She leaned back in the chair. So then the real question becomes, the voice finished the sentence with her. What makes us believe someone might be upset with us in the first place? Cherie sat quietly with that. Memories began to drift through her mind. Conversations with Bob, conversations with friends, essays they had written together about fear and love. So the fear doesn't come from the present moment, she said slowly. No, it comes from old memories. Yes. And those memories start writing stories about the present. Exactly. She nodded slowly. So the participant believes the story, but the observer simply watches it unfold. Cherie looked toward the empty chair across the room. The participant, the observer, two chairs, two perspectives. And suddenly she could hear Bob's voice again from that day. Which chair do you want to live in? Cherie continued looking at the empty chair across the room. The chair had not moved. Nothing in the room had changed. Yet the atmosphere felt different now, as if something had quietly shifted inside her. Fear invents stories, she said slowly, almost testing the words. Yes, and those stories feel real while they're happening. They always do. Cherie leaned forward, elbows resting on her knees. So let's take the example we mentioned, she said, the one that comes up so often. The voice waited. When I asked, are you upset with me? Yes. She smiled faintly. And you, or my memory of you, answer, of course not. Why would I? And what happens next? She thought about that. Wait, well, usually I feel a little embarrassed. Why? because I realized the upset I imagined wasn't actually there. Exactly. Cherie stared again at the empty chair, but something made me think it might be there. Yes. What? The answer came gently. Memory. She nodded. That makes sense. The voice continued. Your mind searches its past for similar situations. Times when someone might have been disappointed. Times when a word was misunderstood. Times when a tone of voice carried something that felt like judgment. Cherie sighed. So the mind gathers those memories, and then it builds a new story from them. Exactly. She laughed softly, which is why the story always feels convincing. Very convincing. She leaned back and shook her head. So fear is basically a novelist, an extremely prolific one. That made her laugh again, and not a very good one either. No, the plots are repetitive. Cherie sat quietly for a moment. Then she asked a deeper question. So if fear is writing the story, why do we believe it? The voice responded without hesitation. Because the participant believes the story is happening to them. She looked at the empty chair again. The participant. Yes, the one sitting in that chair. The thinker. Cherie nodded slowly. The one who thinks they are the character in the drama. Exactly. Her gaze shifted back to her own chair. And the observer? The answer came quietly. The observer simply watches. She closed her eyes for a moment. And when you watch something instead of becoming it, the drama begins to dissolve. That sentence hung in the air like a bell that had just been struck. Cherie opened her eyes again. Bob used to say something like that. Yes. She could almost hear his voice now. You don't have to wrestle every thought that walks into the room. She smiled. He did say that. Often. Another memory surfaced, and Bob Tucker would say something even simpler. Yes. She could almost hear him chuckling. Just because your mind says something doesn't mean you have to RSVP. Cherie laughed out loud. That sounds exactly like him. The voice continued. All three voices were pointing to the same thing. What's that? You are not the thoughts passing through your mind. She looked back at the empty chair again. So the participant believes the thoughts. Yes, but the observer sees them arrive and leave. She nodded. But that's where freedom begins. Exactly. The room became very quiet. Cherie watched her thoughts for a moment, the way someone might watch clouds move across the sky. They were still there. Concerns about the future, memories of conversations, worries about the body and the days ahead. But something about them had changed. They no longer felt quite as heavy. Because the observer isn't trying to solve the thoughts, she said slowly. No. The observer simply notices them. Yes. And when they are noticed without fear, they lose their authority. Cherie let out a long breath. That feels true. It is. Another thought crossed her mind. So the real practice isn't fixing the story. No. It's stepping out of the chair of the participant Exactly. She looked again at the empty chair across from her. The thinker, the worrier, the storyteller, the one who was always trying to figure everything out. Then she looked down at the chair she was sitting in now. The observer, the watcher, the quiet presence behind the noise. She spoke softly. I think I understand now. Tell me. The thoughts may continue. Yes. The stories may still appear. They will. But I don't have to climb into the story every time it appears. Exactly. Cherie smiled. That's actually very good news. It always was. Another quiet moment passed. Then she asked one more question. And when I forget, the voice responded with the warmth of someone who had answered this question many times before. Then you simply notice that you forgot and move back to the observer's chair? Yes. She nodded. That seems almost too simple. Truth often is. Cherie looked around the room once more. 2 chairs, 1 thinker, 1 observer. The difference between them was only a few steps, but the difference in perspective felt enormous. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she could almost hear Bob's voice again. Which chair do you want to live in today? Any comments?
I think that's really just a beautiful example of how we can switch back and forth and change our minds so easily if we ask the right questions. And that's that's what Jesus is asking us throughout the course, and that's what the Holy Spirit's always asking us, the right questions. And so I love that. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you, and I appreciate that.
Okay.
I'm getting an echo from someplace. Okay, it's gone. There's only the 2 of us here, but I want to get I know Lynn and Mike, Mr. Jordan, and Lynn, 3 of us. We're finishing up a new book, which may be my last, but I don't know for sure, and I don't care. But so far, it's almost all written. But I'm going to ask Cherie or Lindsay, I don't care which, if she wants to stay. Oh God, my head just seized up again. To read just the preface, the introduction, and the epilogue. The chapters you can read when you actually look at the book. But I think these 3 items will really tell the story of what the book is all about without reading the chapters right away. So I'm going to let whoever wants read them.
Lynn Costello, did you want to read?
Yeah, I'll start off.
Okay.
The prefix. Because of my age and condition, I have developed a habit of assuming that whenever I am writing at the moment will probably be my last book. or at least my last essay. It seems like a reasonable assumption. After all, the body has a way of reminding us that its warranty period has long since expired. Yet something curious keeps happening. Just when I think the writing chapter of my life has finally come to a close, the Holy Spirit quietly places another idea in front of me. Not a polite suggestion, but something more like a gentle nudge that says, "You're not finished yet." And so apparently, I am not. This time, the idea arrived in a form that surprised even me. Over the years, most of my essays have grown out of life situations. Some, Something happens, a difficulty, a misunderstanding, a moment of fear or confusion, and I turn to A Course in Miracles to see how its ideas apply to the situation at hand. In other words, life presents the problem, and the Course offers the lens through which to see it differently. But today, that process seemed to reverse itself. Instead of beginning with a life situation and applying the Course to it, the idea was this: let the Course itself choose the subject. Specifically, we are going to walk through the 31 chapters of the text and pause at the passages that are least discussed, least taught, and perhaps least understood. The lines that many readers skim over, the sentences that make us pause, frown slightly, and continue reading as if nothing unusual had happened. Those are the passages that caught my attention. Some of them are puzzling, some are radical. Some challenge the very foundations of how we think about the world. Yet each one seems to carry an idea that deserves a closer look. So that is what this book will attempt to do. Each chapter of The Lessons We Prefer Not to See begins with one of those lines from the text of A Course in Miracles. From there, the essay that follows will explore what that idea might mean when it meets the real circumstances of everyday life. Not as an academic explanation, and certainly not as the final word on the subject, but simply as a reflection from someone who has spent many years wrestling with the Course's ideas. In that sense, this book is something of an experiment. Instead of asking how the Course applies to life, we will ask how life reveals the meaning of the Course. And I must admit something at the outset. I have no idea where many of these essays will lead, the passages that have been chosen, but the reflections that will grow from them remain unwritten. They will unfold one at a time, much the way the Course itself often unfolds unexpectedly, which is why which is why I find myself looking forward to the process as much as the result. At this stage of life, curiosity is still a wonderful companion. And if the Holy Spirit has decided that there is still one more book waiting to be written, the least I can do is follow along and see what happens. Frankly, I can't wait to see what I write. If you happen to be walking this path with me, as many of you at ACIM Gather have been for quite some time, you are warmly invited to come along for the journey. All right, the introduction. The essays in the lessons we prefer not to see follow a very simple structure. A Course in Miracles contains 31 chapters in the text, and these essays move through them in that same order. Each chapter of this book begins with a single line or short passage drawn from one of those chapters. Often it will be a sentence that is easily overlooked, rarely quoted, or simply difficult to understand at first reading. These are the passages that tend to make us pause. Sometimes they seem puzzling. Sometimes they appear almost too radical to examine closely. Yet those are often the ideas that carry the deepest implications once we sit with them long enough. Each essay stands on its own. A reader can open the book to any chapter and find a complete reflection centered on the passage that introduces it. In that sense, the essays are independent conversations with the Course, moments of stopping to look carefully at something that might otherwise pass by unnoticed. At the same time, the essays are not entirely separate from one another. The chapters follow the order of the text itself, and brief transitions at the beginning or end of each essay help weave them together. As the book progresses, ideas introduced earlier may quietly reappear in a new light, reflecting the way the Course often circles back to its central themes from a different direction. This approach allows the book to do two things at once. Each essay can be read individually, but together they form a gradual journey through some of the Course's most challenging ideas. The intention is not to provide a final interpretation of these passages. The Course really rarely rewards that kind of certainty. Instead, the purpose is to pause at these lines long enough to consider what they might mean when placed beside the ordinary experiences of daily life. Sometimes the most powerful insights come not from the passages we immediately understand, but from the ones that quietly ask us to look again. And here's the epilogue, the lesson behind the teachers. We have now walked through 31 passages drawn from the 31 chapters of A Course in Miracles. Each passage became the seed for a reflection, an attempt to look more closely at ideas that are often mentioned briefly or overlooked entirely. Some of the ideas may have felt clear and helpful. Others may have felt puzzling, perhaps even uncomfortable. This is not surprising. The Course challenges many of the assumptions most of us have carried all our lives about the world, about ourselves, and about God. While we are here learning through perception, mistakes are inevitable. We will misunderstand passages. We will interpret ideas through the lens of our personal experiences. Sometimes we will think we understand something, only to discover later that we did not. That is not failure. It is simply part of learning. These reflections were never meant to serve as a final authority on the meaning of A Course in Miracles. They were written as invitations, ways of bringing attention to ideas that deserve closer examination in the living classroom of everyday experience. But ultimately, it is not the teacher that matters. It is the lesson. Shall I continue? The paradox of teachers. One of the quiet paradoxes of A Course in Miracles lies in its relationship to teaching. The Course describes itself as a self-study program, At the same time, it includes an entire section entitled The Manual for Teachers. At first glance, this seems contradictory. If the course is self-taught, why would teachers be necessary? The answer becomes clearer when we look at how the course uses the word teacher. A teacher of God is not someone who claims authority or superior understanding. A teacher is simply someone who demonstrates a willingness to learn. Anyone who practices forgiveness becomes a teacher in that moment. The teaching occurs through example rather than explanation, and eventually, even the example becomes unnecessary. The long habit of worshiping teachers. Human history reveals a familiar pattern. When a profound spiritual teacher appears, people often preserve the teacher's words while forgetting the lesson those words were meant to convey. Institutions form, doctrines develop, arguments arise over interpretation. Slowly, the attention shifts from the lesson itself to the personality of the teacher. For nearly 2,000 years, humanity has demonstrated this pattern repeatedly. We study the lives of teachers, honor their authority, and defend their teachings, sometimes forgetting that the purpose of the teaching was to awaken something within ourselves. A Course in Miracles quietly warns against this habit. Its message does not depend on the authority of those who study or teach it. Truth does not belong to teachers. Truth belongs to everyone. When the teachers are gone, the time will come when the teachers of the Course, those who discuss it, write about it, and share their interpretations, will no longer be present. Their voices will fade, their personalities will disappear, and their opinions will gradually be forgotten. That has always been the way of the world. But the idea themselves will remain. The Course does not depend on the individuals who attempt to explain it. Its message stands on its own. Long after the teachers have disappeared, the invitation contained in its words will still be available. Peace is possible. Forgiveness is the doorway. And the separation we believed in never truly occurred. The classroom of life. The ideas explored in these essays were never meant to remain confined to printed pages. The real classroom is not a book, but the experiences of daily life. Every relationship becomes a lesson. Every irritation reveals a belief that can be questioned. Every moment of kindness demonstrates the possibility of another way of seeing. The Course does not ask us to withdraw from the world. It invites us to reinterpret it. When perception changes, the world becomes less threatening and more instructive. The classroom appears everywhere. The simplicity beneath the complexity. At the beginning of this project, the intention was to explore passages that are rarely emphasized. Yet as the essays unfolded, a pattern emerged. Every idea, no matter how complex it first appeared, pointed to the same simple insight. The ego is built upon a misunderstanding. Love corrects that misunderstanding. When the mind becomes willing to question the ego's interpretation of reality, The complicated structures of fear and judgment begin to dissolve. The lesson itself is simple. Accepting it may take a lifetime. A final invitation. If these reflections accomplish anything, let them serve as an invitation. Read the Course carefully. Question what you think it means. Allow its ideas to challenge the assumptions that seem most certain. And above all, test its principles in the situations that arise in your life. The Course encourages this kind of exploration. Truth does not require blind acceptance. Truth does not require blind acceptance. It simply asks to be recognized. Would somebody else like to read?
Sure, I'll read.
Thank you.
The quiet ending. For centuries, humanity has studied teachers, preserved their words, and debated their meanings. Yet the transformation those teachers pointed toward does not occur through intellectual agreement. It occurs through recognition. The lesson of A Course in Miracles does not belong to those who explain it. It belongs to the mind that becomes willing to learn it. And when that learning occurs, even briefly, the long search for peace begins to end. Not because someone told us the answer, but because we finally recognized it for ourselves. Thank you. So thank you. You know, I wanted to say something that was mentioned in this epilogue, and I'm not even sure where the idea came up, because no place in A Course in Miracles does it say it's a self-study course. It doesn't say that at all, that it's a self-study course. I'm not sure where. I hear it all the time, and I'd love to have someone explain to me where it says that in the course. The course is actually looking at the self, the holy self, and the little self, the ego self. So in that way, we are studying the self. We're studying the ego self, looking at its, what it does and how it works, and looking at the self with a capital S, that is what we truly are. Um, and so in that way, it is a study of the self, the selves, but it doesn't say it in the course. And unless someone can point out to me that where it does, I would love to see that, because like I said, I hear it all the time. But but I've never actually seen it. Um, anyway, those are my thoughts. And
Yeah,
who's
thank you, Lynn. I want to address that slightly, and I'm having trouble hearing as well as talking. When I say that when I use the phrase self-study course, I meant it as each individual is learning the course on their own, meaning the course itself is the teacher. No, I'm not studying myself or yourself or their self. I'm studying the course by myself, alone, without a teacher. And that's the way I meant that. And that's a little bit different than the way you're explaining it. And I have to admit, right now, I can't remember where I saw that or even where I first heard it. So that's fine. Um, but you see where I'm coming from?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
Okay.
see it completely. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I just want to kind of point out that the call for teachers is not problematic because he's not saying it's a self-study course. He's saying I need teachers. And so that yeah, there should be no confusion between that. Anyway, those are just my thoughts.
I may have to go back and rewrite the epilogue.
Well, you could just make it some say it is a self-study course, or it appears to be a self-study course. Because but it doesn't say that it's a self-study course that I could find. If someone can find it for me, I would love to, because I've heard it for years. People have said it all the time. So
Yeah, and I think we've heard it from each other and began to think it was actually part of the course.
yep.
Okay. I don't have any more for today. I'm exhausted.
Okay.
Maria's exhausted. And oh wait, there's some people in the chat. Let me look. Hello, chat. Where are you? Yeah, Lynn said the same thing. Okay. Lynn, thank you for staying as long as you did. Lynn C. I appreciate it. Shereen, you have anything else?
No, I just want to thank everyone for all of your patience and assisting and so on. And look forward to seeing you tomorrow afternoon.
Thanks, you guys. I love you both
Oh,
so
there's
much.
Doug. Hi, Doug.
Yeah, Dove is here. Steve is here. Linda Joy is here. Someone called 007 was here a minute ago. I don't know who that was.
Bond, James Bond.
That must have been super secret, James Bond. Steve says, what is there to know but the self, an inside thing? Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it is a self-study. We're studying all the self, the ego self, the holy self. And that's how we're able to make a decision. So thanks you guys so much. I appreciate you being here. And
Hey, before we go, I gotta
yes.
ask Doug a question. Doug, what happened to you? What does the other guy look like?
Oh, you haven't been here. He's talking, but he's muted. I think it was a wall or something. You feel
No, I actually wasn't talking. I was just saying, I don't know what happened to me. I don't know. I really don't know.
yeah.
Ain't that the
Anyway,
story of every...
anyway, it's my body and I'm not a body. So,
All right,
Yeah.
guys.
All right. Love you
We'll see
guys.
some of you again tomorrow.
See y'all tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cherie. I love you.